People around the world are marking Holocaust Remembrance Day amid heightened tensions from the war between Israel and Hamas. It's been 79 years since the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp in Poland. Hundreds are gathered at the death camp to observe the day. A group of survivors, state officials, and other participants came together near the ruins of the crematoria to memorialize the 1.1 million people who were murdered in Auschwitz, most of them Jews. The day is being observed in many other countries to honor nearly 6 million European Jews and other groups who were killed in the Nazi genocide during World War II. Today has special resonance for Elly Gotz. He's a Holocaust survivor, and he joins us from his home in Toronto. Mr. Gotz, thank you very much for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be with you.
I wanted to just ask you off the top, I know you've been out busy doing things in the community today. What does today mean to you?
Today there is a new life here in Canada in terms of anti-Semitism and the issues in the Far East, in the Middle East. So I'm quite upset about it. But generally, Canada is a wonderful country. I'm so happy to be here. I've lived here 60 years now. 1964 I came.
And you had quite a life before coming here to Canada. You were 13, as I understand it, living in Lithuania when the Second World War broke out. Can you, if you're comfortable talking about it, just tell us what happened to you and your family?
We were locked up in the ghetto in Lithuania. A capital of Lithuania was Kaunas, and we lived in Kaunas. My parents and I was born to a Jewish family, only child, and we moved into the ghetto when the Germans came in 1941. We were locked up in the ghetto. 30,000 Jews came in, and 3 years later, there were only about 6,000 Jews left. And we went hiding because the Russian army came close, and we were going to be occupied again by the Russians instead of the Germans. But the Germans announced we are liquidating the ghetto, which meant for us they are going to kill us. We hid in a basement, and we decided to commit suicide if they find us. My mother was a nurse. She prepared syringes, and I was sitting in front of those syringes for 3 long days and nights watching her, and right in front of her, because I expected to be first. I had my 3 uncles, my aunt, my parents, and I in the basement. We covered the door with a cupboard. 2 soldiers came down. They didn't find us. They walked out. My mother put away the syringe. She's not going to inject me anymore. And we sat another 2 days. And then we decided to go out and have a look. We expected the Russians to be there already, the Russian army. But the Germans were still there. They put us on a train and they took us to Dachau, Dachau concentration camp, for another year. The women remained in another camp in Stutthof. And then Dachau, 10 months in Dachau, total starvation, 12-hour shifts of work. I was a mechanic already at 16 when I arrived. I got a good job in a pump station, which saved my life. I worked indoors. I got my father to work indoors. And after weighing 70 pounds, when I was liberated from hunger, from disease, all kinds of stories we haven't got time to tell, we survived. We were liberated in central Camp Dachau by the American army on the 29th of October.
And we are so glad that you survived to tell us this story of such a harrowing experience. And, you started talking there about how you feel about the way things are going in society today. You mentioned the rise in anti-Semitism. Of course, we're seeing a rise as well in extremism, and then what's going on in Israel, in Gaza right now. How are you feeling about what you're seeing around the world and here at home in Canada, having had this experience?
I speak to some 100 times a year to schools and universities, telling them about the Holocaust and teaching them not to hate. I teach very strongly about hate. When I came out of the hospital 6 months after liberation, I was full of hate. I wanted to kill Germans. I was looking for a gun. But I gave it up because I realized it's ridiculous. You can't kill people after the war. And besides, when I'm hating, I'm not thinking about myself. I'm thinking about them. So I urge people not to hate, to remember what Buddha taught. To hate is like taking poison and hoping that the other would die. Hate blunts the mind for logic. When I gave up hate, I started living for the first time. And I remembered I want to be an engineer, and I have only grade 6, so I hid the books. I studied, I worked, I learned, I took a trade, electronic repair of radios, and I applied to university. But we left Germany after 2 years sitting in refugee camps. We went to Norway. In Norway, I learned Norwegian in 3 months, and I applied for a job, which I got. I was going to night school. And then my father wrote to a relative in Africa, in Johannesburg, send money. My son wants to be an engineer. And the uncle replied, come to Africa. I'll make sure he can go to university. So we flew from Norway to Africa. We settled in Zimbabwe. At the time, it was Rhodesia, a British colony. And now I had to learn English. I just learned Norwegian, which was my 5th language. Now I had to learn English.
You've been sharing your experience, as you say, with students, and I understand that one of them wrote you a letter that you wanted to talk to us about. A 6th grader, is that right?
That's right. A 6th grader wrote me on a 3x5, on a small card, 3x5. The teacher used to give them cards and say, write to Elly Gotz. And he wrote, jeepers, that was a good talk. Hunting crocodiles, riding horses, flying an aeroplane as a pilot, and 6 languages. I just play soccer.
Well, it sounds like you really are inspiring people. We only have a minute left, but can you just tell me quickly what you'd like people to take away from your experience going forward for the next generation?
We've got to stop hate. I'm very upset with the world that after the Holocaust and the lesson that it taught, we are still killing people. We are still having decimation of people all over the world, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in China. It's awful. The world has not learned from the Holocaust what I wanted them to know.